with Darren Wray of Fifth Step. Darren's the CEO of the company. Darren, thanks for inviting me to your office in London.
No problem at all. Great to see you.
And we're in a fabulous office here in central London. Darren, I'd love to tell our listeners a bit about the company. So why don't we start off with that, if that's okay?
Sure. Well, Fifth Step's a really interesting organisation. We help financial services and anyone who really is highly regulated to get their IT, get their governance, get their data compliance in the right place, and make sure they got their change programs working effectively, delivering the results that they need delivered in the timeframes they need delivered.
Now, you've got a really interesting setup because you've got, I know, over about 50 people in the company. You've got offices in Bermuda, you've got offices in New York, and obviously here in London.
Yeah.
What's your bit of background about how you perhaps set up the company and how this has expanded out to those three destinations?
People. Yeah, sure. Started off as my co-founder Phil Lear and myself. We set the business up with pretty much in mind what we're doing at the moment. There's been some changes and some developments and some enhancements along the way, of course. But because I had a background having worked in the insurance sector, IT director level, because I'd had that and worked internationally, geography really wasn't something that I or Phil was afraid of. So we sort of set things up in a very geographically agnostic way. So everything was very cloud-based right from the very beginning, so we could work from anywhere, but it also meant that we could serve clients from anywhere. And then it was a natural process really to follow our customers' needs and our customers' decision makers to New York and also to Bermuda.
And you do a lot of work in the financial services industry, I think in the insurance as well, and law. Is that all around the regulation? I know obviously there's a lot of regulation across those industries.
Yeah.
Is that an area that is your focus? And
it's not really the regulation as such, but we work with those highly regulated companies because those guys understand the value of doing it right and doing it right first time, not having to go back over it or explain to an auditor why this wasn't documented in this way or appropriately. So what we try to do is make sure that we're following the processes that we would recommend right from the outset, helping our clients be compliant from the outset point as well.
Got it. Now, I know before the podcast we were talking about GDPR very briefly, and obviously British Airways has recently been for a big fine in that. Just out of interest, what have you seen in the landscape with organisations now? Have people turned off it? Have they thought about it? Is their whole team still working on it? What's your quick take on that?
It's very much a combination of both. I think what most organisations recognise is they've not proceduralised it enough. It's still a project plus. It hasn't gone into project to BAU piece hasn't fully converted over in some cases. So that's a bit of a challenge. So yes, in some organisations there are teams working still to complete that project to BAU piece. But I think the interesting thing, mentioning BA and the Marriott breaches and the fines, I think the interesting piece there is it's going to raise it back up to the board level conversation and board agendas again. Have we actually got this kicked now? These guys thought they had it kicked. Do we need to revisit this again? Yeah. And I think there's those questions going to be asked again.
Now, you've been in this industry for a long time. We were talking about IR35 a little bit earlier as well, and that first rendition of the IR35. But I'm just curious what a typical day in the business looks like for you now, running this business as the leader.
Well, our business is really a people business, whether it's people clients business or people consultants business. So it's all about dealing with the consultants, making sure they're happy, making sure that we've got the resources, making sure that you're helping them identify either issues or challenges and indeed opportunities, and working with those guys to make sure they're as happy as they can be. And there's meeting with clients and working with both existing clients and prospective clients. Trying to win new clients, of course, that's the nature of business, but also making sure that existing clients are happy and that we're serving them in the right way. And it's an important aspect, particularly for me, that I really like doing, is going in and listening to the signals that they're giving. Oh, we're starting to do things this way, or we're not sure that we're going to do things this way anymore, or whatever. Whatever those small signals may be. Sometimes those signals turn into a massive message. And we can get to market far earlier with that change in service, just because we're able to understand our clients' needs perhaps a little bit better than some of our competitors.
That's great to hear. Who's had an impact on you as a leader? Perhaps someone who's been a mentor for you over the years. And what's the backstory? And can you share that a little bit with us?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I had a couple of bosses when I was younger. In fact, one of my very first bosses, when I first came into my profession, spent a lot of time with me that they didn't necessarily need to do. I was relatively young at that point, all that kind of stuff. But they spent a lot of time with me explaining their challenges as a CIO and what they needed and what they needed from me as well. Now that gave me a really good understanding in the business of the business from a CIO's perspective from quite an early stage. Now, I don't say that I took it all in at that point because obviously, you're younger and your job is very different and sometimes you don't always see what the CIO sees. But certainly at that point in time, that early in my career, that really helped me understand things and understand things better now. And when I became an IT leader, and even today I reflect back on some of those things that person shared and said to me way back when, 30 odd years ago, scarily enough.
And I'm curious about the engagement. You've got a growing business. You've got over 50 people in three different countries and probably a few other places as well for supporting your customers. So how do you keep your employees engaged in the business? It's
a challenge. It really is because sometimes we'll have consultants who spend more time on the client side than they do on fifth step side. Now that's very much the way our business works. But what we try to do is try to bring people, back to base, so that have conversations with us on a regular basis. Touch base, even if it's only for a coffee. The coffee, the lunches, the video conferences. Keeping things regular, but keeping things informal. Sharing things, sharing up and coming work, and that kind of stuff with them is the administrative side. But just making sure that you're touching base as often as you can. Can't always do it as often as you'd like to, but you do it as often as you can. Try to help them feel as involved with the business as they actually are.
I haven't heard the phrase mentioned that often by my clients recently, but you do hear the phrase going native sometimes in organisations, which is what you just touched on there. They're on the client side. So how do organisations help perhaps to keep that cohesion together? You've mentioned some of them there. How do you keep that person perhaps really embedded to the organisation?
Well, the great thing about the way that fifth step works is that, of course, we'll have some consultants who are working full time for a particular client, but because of our flexible and fractional model, it means that sometimes we'll have a consultant who's working with one client in the morning and another client in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So the opportunity for them to go native, as you said, is perhaps lessened. But for those who are on site all the time, it's really about regular delivery and operational calls, making sure that they're understanding that actually, the boss is back here, actually, helping there and being supportive, as well as, keeping an eye on things and making sure that they're doing the best things for the client and not going native within the team or within the client as well, because those two things can be slightly different sides of the same coin.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing business leaders today, in your opinion?
I think there's a lot of challenges. The economy can be a little bit funny. I think there's a lot of FUD, if you like, fear, uncertainty, and doubt in some aspects of the economy at the moment. But I think the great thing is that we're still, if you look at where the FTSE 100 is at the moment, things like that, the market is still in an upward trend. Yes, there's people who are saying, well, that's perhaps going to change, but at the moment, generally speaking, the market is in an upward trend. And I think that those challenges, balancing those two things can be a challenge, but you've already touched on some of them. It really is about being, people orientated, where both client people orientated, but also for us being, consultant orientated as well.
What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Oh, that's a really good one. And I really think that there's a couple of pieces. There was one piece, and I was given this relatively recently, sort of within the last 2 years. I don't follow it out anywhere near to the extent that to the person who gave it to me does, but there's the 3-foot rule, and I've talked about this a couple of times in other forums as well, but the rule as a person gave it to me was you speak to anyone who's within 3 feet of you, okay, because you'll always learn something. Maybe you learn that you don't want to speak to that person anymore or whatever, joking aside, though, you actually speak to that person to understand, their position. What is it that they're working on? Where do they work? What, is there something perhaps you can be helping them with? But it's not all about sales or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It is about understanding and getting a better measure of the world. Now, the person I got this advice to would follow this very religiously. I follow it a little less religiously than that, but I think you have to be as gregarious and outgoing as that sometimes when you're a leader to actually be able to say and get the signs and insight and those signals that I spoke about earlier on. Yeah. Getting them from the outside.
And you never know who you're talking to, of course.
You never know who you're talking to, exactly. Sometimes they're the CEO of another company, sometimes they're the janitor of a company. It doesn't really matter, you still get insights and interest, and people are interesting.
What, when a new person comes into Fifth Step, what's the way that you help them to understand the culture in the business?
Yeah, a real challenge, I think, particularly when you're in multiple locations as well. But what we do is we have at least a couple of people from the organisation as well as their boss meet with them as well. Obviously, their boss is meeting with them far more regularly, but so I'll meet with them, and I find that very important to meet with them because I can give them the oversight and the background and the story of Fifth Step from the horse's mouth. Now, that's only scalable to a certain size. We both understand that, of course, but that's important to me in doing that transfer, that knowledge transfer, helping them understand what's important to me, what's important to the business, where the business has come from, or where I see things going, and giving them the opportunity to ask those questions directly to the CEO. And we're small enough that I very much have an open door or open messenger policy where people can phone me, email me, IM me at any time of the day or night virtually. 3 a.m. I'm not quite as friendly as I might otherwise be.
But time zone you're on, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. But keeping the door open like that and being able to transfer the culture and the knowledge and stuff like that, making sure they understand the values that that the organisation holds, that I hold, and that others within the organisation hold, and being open and frank and okay about talking about that kind of stuff. Not feeling in any respect that's management mumbo jumbo. I had an old boss, a very long time ago now, explain to me, when we were going on when I was going on an initiation induction day. So, this is all about management mumbo jumbo. When you come back, we'll tell you what it's all about. But actually, what I got out of that was what the business more broadly was looking for and looking to do, and that's what we try to do, on a regular basis as part of getting consultants together, but also especially, most importantly, when they first join.
You mentioned there about communication, by the way. I just want to bring something up. I'm curious how you manage things like your inbox, your communication to your staff. How do you do that without having overload within an organisation, or what have you seen organisations do that you work with as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty good. I don't think, there may be a few people who do suffer from inbox overload. We try not to treat email as an instant message replacement. Okay, if you do need something more urgently, there's the phone, or there's we use Google Hangouts. There's Google Hangouts to be able to send a message more that has an urgency, more instantness associated with it. So we try not to put that pressure on people in terms of their inbox, but we do expect people to be up to date with what they need to be up to date with too. So there is that fine line to walk between those two things. Me personally, the way that I manage it is it's more of a triage exercise, and actually triaging what's coming in. Do I need to deal with that relatively urgently? Is it something that a client's just messaged they've got an issue, or an opportunity? As a consultant, likewise got an issue that I need to be helping them with. So triaging and making sure then that you're dealing with it at the appropriate time, rather than prioritising everything to be now, and not assuming then that everything in your inbox necessarily has to be dealt with, today, or even necessarily tomorrow. Sometimes a couple of days down the line is okay still.
Yeah. What, excuse me, is there a story perhaps that you could share from your childhood that influenced your work ethic in later life?
Oh, I think there's many. I think there's many stories. I think the one that I think is probably the most important to me was taught to me by my dad, who Okay, so my dad had a colleague, and I'll keep this relatively short. But my dad had a colleague, and basically this guy would promise the world and deliver far less. So it's really about expectation management, and also about expectation setting. You know, you can have it tomorrow when actually it's always going to be delivered the next day. But you know, my dad didn't necessarily want to hear that it was going to be delivered the next day. So it disappointed him, in the future rather than in the moment. And I was working with my father when I was probably about 13 or 14, I guess, and saw some of this going on. And I said to my dad afterwards, I said, he's not going to deliver on that. He's not going to actually get you that on time. I could see in the guy's eyes that he wasn't telling the truth. It wasn't my job to tell my dad that at all. And he said, son, you're right. When he doesn't deliver that way, I'll sit down and have that conversation with him and go through it in a lot more detail with him as to why he thought he was going to be able to deliver it sooner, why he thought it was okay to misset my expectations. Now, that was an ongoing piece with my father and this guy, but in the end, that guy ended up running that business and actually then had all those challenges himself, but then actually managed his time far more efficiently. So I think there's a combination of two aspects there. I think there's the mentoring aspect and there's the expectation setting and the importance of delivery. To your boss, sure, of course, to your boss, but to whoever that may be. Now, to me, they're really important, both life lessons, but business lessons, because you can't do business with people who misset or mismanage your expectations, because you're always wondering, is this going to come off? Are they going to deliver here? Are they actually going to be there? Yeah.
What do you think your industry is going to look like in 5 years' time?
So the management consulting industry, I think, is being so people-orientated, I think is going to develop and change quite slowly. But I think the industries that we work with, like the insurance and financial services sectors, I think they are about to change at a far greater pace than many of them appreciate at the moment, because I think there's aspects like InsurTech, there's AI that's been brought on board, at an increasing rate. So I think what our job is to understand and be able to foresee those changes within those businesses and help those organisations make those changes in a cost-effective and a business-focused way. So I think from that perspective, they're very much going to change. But management consultancy is still very people-orientated. It's not going to get surpassed by AI or anything like that right at the moment. But hey, perhaps 5+ years' time, you might start getting the birth of the AI business consultant.
It'd be fascinating to see how that develops.
It really would, right?
If you had your time again and you were giving your 20-year-old self advice, looking back now, what's the one thing that you would say to yourself?
I think it's really about maintain the persistence. Every leader, everyone who's ever led a team or led a business or whatever, there are going to be times when it's going to be tough. There's going to be times when you're going to doubt the direction, but it is really genuinely about the persistence and about being able to maintain that vision and being able to share and communicate that vision. To me, I think communication is really important and really key to being able to maintain the flow and direction of a business.
Darren, it's been great talking today.
Thank you.
And thanks for inviting us this morning to the office.
No problem.
What's the best way? If people want to find out more about the company, connect with you, how can they go about doing that?
Well, www.fifthstep.com is ideal. You can find out lots about us there. It's an interesting website, I think. We're about to go through some changes with it as well, so it'll get even more interesting. Reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, Darren Wray, Ray with a W. I'm not the guy in the Midwest who's a musician or indeed the magician. Easily confused, but not those guys. But yeah, reach out to me personally on there, and likewise on Twitter.
Fantastic. And if you're listening to this and you reach out to Darren on LinkedIn, do personalise the message. Say you listen to his podcast.
Please do.
I'm sure he'll appreciate the personal touch. Darren, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the business.
Great. Thanks very much for your time.